Thank you very much. Welcome again. This is the seminar series INEGI UCSD, and we're very glad to be here. When I was planning for what to present, I'm an economist and I'm a historian, and I decided not to present anything about economics, anything about history. And in contrast, I'll be talking about something that I learned when I arrived at INEGI 3 years ago as vice president. And that is a pilot project conducted at INEGI on ecosystem accounting. And it's a fascinating topic. I'm far from being an expert, but what I want to show you is what INEGI has been doing in the field of environmental accounting, which is very good, and what is the road ahead. So I'll be talking about this mostly natural capital valuation and ecosystem accounting in Mexico, which is part of a pilot project, and then its implications for policy making. So, what is environmental economic accounting? You might be familiar to the system of national accounts. The system of national accounts is the basis for computing GDP, for computing input-output tables. So this system that was born in 1947, it's now adopted for more than 200 countries. And so it allows us to compare economic performance. Economic performance in long series of GDP measurements. And most of the countries follow the manual produced by the United Nations. So it's a very widespread, homogeneous way of understanding economic performance. So being familiar with the GDP, this is just the Mexican GDP. You can see the COVID decrease or the impact of COVID. So we all are more or less familiar with what is GDP. At the same time, you might be familiar with a discussion of what is measured what is in the GDP measurement and what is not. Well, part of what is not measured in the GDP is precisely the depletion of natural resources, the use of natural resources. Because the GDP allows us to, well, it's not here, it would be later. So the GDP allows us to measure the production of goods and services, man-produced goods and services. So with this idea in mind, INEGI, for the last 15 years, have been trying to better understand the surroundings of what is being measured in the GDP. And one powerful way of doing that is through satellite accounts. Satellite accounts is like taking in more detail certain aspects of the economy. So satellite accounts, INEGI has developed these satellite accounts. As early as 1991, INEGI developed a satellite accounts on the environment. At the end of the last century, on tourism. On 2011, a non-profit institution. So what is the, how do non-profit institutions contribute to income in general in the country? The same was true for health, and a very important one, the unpaid household work, culture, tourism, which continue the work done in 1999, and housing. So this is a way of expanding the reach of the GDP. But still, it's not incorporated into the GDP. But still, it gives us a lot of information. For instance, the unpaid household work was crucial now for a new survey we have on the care system in Mexico, so that women can be free to be incorporated in the labor markets instead of performing all this unpaid household work. So one way of expanding the reach of the GDP is through satellite accounts. So the SNA, the System of National Accounts, on the left-hand side of the screen, you see the System of National Accounts, the traditional System of National Accounts. On the right-hand side, you see what it looks like, the information INEGI produces. Not only the GDP, the traditional GDP and the traditional System of National Accounts, but also all the satellite accounts that provides information to users on specific sectors. Although this is very important, still it needs to go deeper in certain aspects that are not covered in these satellite accounts. So INEGI engaged very early in the late 1980s, but mostly in the 1990s, on producing a framework for environmental economic accounting. Our business is statistics. So what we need to do is to produce a framework that tells us how to collect information, how to process information, how to disseminate information. So along with the World Bank, with the UNSD, which is the United Nations Statistical Division, and INEGI, we all put together a project to produce environmental accounts and derive macroeconomic aggregates. This in the framework of the GDP on the System of National Accounting. By 1996, INEGI was one of the first institutions in the world to have a national system of environmental economic accounts, a complete system. And that allows INEGI to produce the ecological net domestic product. That is a GDP that considers forest resources, air pollution, water pollution, and subterranean water. It's not complete. There are many things we can add up to, but since the mid-1990s, INEGI was already producing what is called the green GDP. So, and you might say, well, maybe other countries were already doing that. Well, they were thinking in doing that. But it took until 2012 that the United Nations published the System of Environmental Economic Accounting Central Framework. So for more than a decade, INEGI had a framework to produce the green GDP, and globally it took until 2012 for having this system of environmental economic accounting. Of course, we were central, we were key in producing such framework. A year later, it says 2025 and it should say 2015. The development of the ecosystem accounting framework is not only the environmental, but now the focus of the UN was the ecosystems. What do ecosystems, how statistical office need to treat ecosystems in their data collection? So they developed the framework for the ecosystem accounting, and in 2017 through 2021, INEGI and other 6 offices, not only statistical offices, but agencies in countries, in 6 countries develop a pilot project called Valuation of Natural Capital and Ecosystem Services, better known as NCAVES. So it was Mexico, Brazil, South Africa, India, and China. In the case of China, it was just a province. In the case of Mexico, it was all Mexico, as the same was true for Brazil and South Africa. The common characteristics of all these 6 countries, 5 countries, is that they are mega diverse. They do have mega diverse natural resources endowment. So we do participate, having the experience of being producers of the green GDP for at least 15 to 20 years. So what is the approach of the NCAVES project? The approach is, yes, you can have the system of national accounts, you can have the satellite accounts, but what really need to be encompassing all these measurements is well-being measurements, like, for instance, something that we also at INEGI produce, which is the self-reported well-being survey. So it's not only what if the GDP is growing, it's what I, as Graciela, feel. That how am I doing? Am I doing good? Am I earning more, but maybe having less time to spend with my kids? So what's my self-reported well-being measurement? And also, other dimension that needs to encompass the SNA, the System of National Accounting, is the natural capital and ecosystem services. So this is the sort of holistic approach that follows NCAVES. So, key terms. On the one hand, what is ecosystem services? Because I've been talking about ecosystem and ecosystem services, but what is ecosystem services? Perhaps we do not realize it, but ecosystems around cities, ecosystems within cities, or ecosystems far away from cities do provide produces goods and services that we use in the human activities. So what we're trying to do in trying to measure these services is to get an idea so that we need to push policies for preservation. So it's like measuring what it's not that visible. It's putting visibility on ecosystem services. On the other hand, the approach is the natural capital. It's the approach of capitals. There is physical capital, there is human capital, but there is also natural capital. And natural capital is defined as a set of renewable and non-renewable natural resources of an ecosystem. These biological systems supply us with goods such as water, wood, construction materials, energy, medicines, or genetic resources, to name a few. So with these 2 key terms, I will explain you in very briefly. Actually, it's a very complex process, but I'll try to make it simple, to keep it simple, what the NCAVES project is about. So the NCAVES project measures the condition of the ecosystems, the extension of the ecosystem, and it adds a monetary valuation to that condition and extension, so that we get the valuation of ecosystem services. This is very complicated in statistical terms, because unless other, INEGI has a lot of experience because we have a very important branch of geographic information production. but not many other national offices have. Actually, it's only Brazil and Mexico that have all together statistics and geography. So let me go. On the left-hand side, it's sort of a mapping of an ecosystem. But what we need is the right-hand side. In an ecosystem, there are many layers, and there are many different things going on. So we need an organization to measure the extension of an ecosystem. So we need to go from the left-hand side to the right-hand side for a measurement of the extension of ecosystems. Having done that for Mexico, we ended up with these statistics. The net changes of the extension of ecosystems between 2002 and 2014 was it's on the screen. It's on the graph on the screen. So what we have is that from an accounting and geographical perspectives, this measurement of extension changes over time. Main negative changes, it's in deciduous forests, grasslands, woody shrubs, and even green forest, shown in the graphs. Positive changes, that is, that the extension grew over that period of time, was annual agriculture, human settlements, and oak forest. So we organize all sort of extension of ecosystems in the country, and these are the results in that period. So while some of them grew, some others decreased. Annual agricultural stands out for the greatest increases. In 10 of 32 states at rates of more than 2% in many of these states. Other large relative increases in land use occur in cultivated forests, the example is Tabasco, and aquaculture in Baja California Sur, Tamaulipas, and Campeche. So having that established, so we move now to condition. So it's not only how many hectares or how many square kilometers we do have of a certain ecosystem, but what's the quality? What is the condition of such ecosystem? And so in that, the conservation status of our vegetation, we used the land use and vegetation series of INEGI. And this is very, very, I referred to before, the land use and vegetation charts or series are maps of Mexico in which we can identify what is land being used for. So in that, so it's vegetation being conserved. It's primary vegetation that is relatively well preserved, or is secondary and it's degraded. So we use that for measuring condition. But also we use the human footprint index because we're trying to get all the information possible to determine whether the condition is, because remember, we are interested in the services provided by ecosystems. So we need to know extension and condition. And so INEGI also used the Ecological Integrity Index developed by Conavio in 2009. And finally, there was this collaboration through the NCAPES project that we developed along with Conavio and many other institutions in Mexico, the Ecosystem Integrity Index. And so the ecosystem integrity index looks like that. So green is more integrity of the ecosystems, red, less integrity of the ecosystems. So the agricultural sector highly, so this ecosystem integrity index evaluates the condition of ecosystems based on information obtained from the Institute of Forestry in Mexico and satellite images. We use machine learning and so on and so forth. So this is, Rodolfo will be talking extensively on that, but this is one of the uses of what Rodolfo will be talking in the next session. So once we had condition and we have extension, we need to put a number. How much does it value? And so we did that exercise for agriculture, for the services provided by ecosystems to agricultural production and pollination. So here are the numbers. I will not go through all of them, but it was a very, I shouldn't say difficult, but very complex way of putting numbers to how much does pollination value. So we went with all these computations. We did the same for the carbon storage and sequestration. The same for water, for the economic valuation of household water supply service, and tourism. People come to San Diego as tourists because there are natural resources. They go to the Borrego natural area, but without the Borrego natural area, there would not be those tourists. So the ecosystems provide also nature tourism, cultural tourism. So we measure all that, and we set a value to those services, and this is the result. The result is that 3.9% of GDP, it's the value of the ecosystem services provided by ecosystems to human activities. So without ecosystems, we would, I mean, that's the value, at least the lower bound value. And this is very, very important because this is the first time we looked at ecosystem services and get a number. So it's like the GDP. The GDP is that little big number. Well, this is a little big number on the ecosystem services. That was a pilot project. It's, as you might imagine, very expensive, very complex. We used information from very different sources. We have to work in an interdisciplinary team. And they are already being used in the SDGs, in the Sustainable Development Goals, number 6, number 15, and also for the Goal B of the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. And of course, this ecosystem services measurement will be crucial for the discussions of the beyond GDP indicators that are currently being discussed. Actually, sometimes call it beyond GDP or GDP and beyond, and it has an implication for how we name it, this new trend of encompassing well-being as well as environmental measurement in how do we measure economic performance. And if you're interested in the more detailed, more technical, I try not to make it very technical. My team prepared me with some equations and all the mathematical things, but I said, no, I mean, it's just trying, the details of the mathematical and all the sources are in the publications Cuentas de los Ecosistemas de México. It's online, you can download for free in our website. What are we planning for next steps? First of all, develop a harmonized interoperable databases to measure natural capital. That's the big goal. Broaden the evaluation of ecosystem services to develop monetary accounts of ecosystem assets. Because here is the flow, but we also want to measure the stock, the wealth of ecosystems, the ecosystem assets. But also, we want, of course, to include more ecosystems and services. We measure 6 services, but there are many others. So we need to develop frameworks, techniques, new sources, explore new sources, satellite imagery, to help us to determine. And that would be crucial. But also, this is huge, and Rodolfo knows that. And it keeps me awake. Develop ocean accounts. No, I mean, ocean accounts is humongous project. So, and it would require data that is not available. We do not have data. INEGI do not have data, or very, very little data on ocean ecosystems. So we might start out by exploring mangrove ecosystem services, which is crucial. It's crucial for hurricanes prevention. It's crucial for the life in oceans. But of course, there are other studies. So these are next steps. I should say these are potential next steps. We do not have the databases, the resources, to conduct that. But at least we know that the road ahead, it's a rich road, and it's a complicated road, but certainly a challenging one that we might to go and explore. And with that, I finish and I thank you.
I'd rather walk around if the IT guys don't kill me. So my name's Gordon McCord. I am a professor of economics here at GPS, and I specialize in sustainable development. And so I'm just delighted that INEGI chose that the very first topic was going to be this one that Dr. Marquez presented so wonderfully. And I think I chuckled when you said at the very beginning, I'm not going to talk about history and I'm not going to talk about economics because those are the things I know about. This is the economics of the 21st century. I think we are living at a time of unprecedented biodiversity collapse, fishery collapse, dangerous climatic change, collapse of agricultural systems as we deplete our groundwater, incredible loss of biodiversity as we deplete our forests in the tropical areas around the world. So the idea that economics can exist as a field, that the science of how to optimize a world in scarcity can omit environmental goods and services is completely wrong at a deep, deep, deep fundamental level. So I congratulate INEGI for having chosen this topic and for all of the work. This is fantastic. And let me react a little bit from my vantage point. And some of these things were mentioned, but I think that they're important to highlight, and they're important in that they underline INEGI's leadership over the last few decades on these issues. So I, in addition to being here at UCSD, I help lead a large umbrella organization of universities around the world called the Sustainable Development Solutions Network. They're led by Professor Jeffrey Sachs at Columbia University under the auspices of the Secretary General, 3,000 universities around the world, whose mission is to inform and support government in meeting the SDGs. So we should talk about those a little bit and why this is so important and why I choose to spend my time on doing it. As I mentioned, we live at a time of tremendous crises, and all fields of study that care about human well-being over the last 40 years or so have come to the recognition. And, you know, economists were late to the party, but they've arrived to say that the world we live in is complex. And if you care about human well-being, you can't just care about the narrow silo of what you do. And that if we care about human well-being over the long run, we need to think much more holistically about the fact that reality is complex. And that, yes, we care about economic growth, and we care about jobs, and we care about income and consumption, and we care about technology and innovation, but we also need to care about education, and we need to care about health, and we need to care about gender equality and social inclusion and environmental sustainability and peace, the end of conflict and good governance, and that all these things are not niceties that we should think about when we have time, but that they are in fact core elements of the production of human well-being, and that what is kind of classically the comfort zone of economists, what I have a PhD in economics, what we're trained to think about is only a piece of the puzzle. And so as we moved at the end of the 20th century from the global framework on goals for what we should all be cooperating on as a global community, which were the Millennium Development Goals, which had goals for the year 2000 for developing countries only, largely around economic development and poverty reduction, we entered the 21st century with a recognition that that's insufficient, that we need to think much, much more deeply and carefully about the environmental part of what sustains human well-being now and into the future. And the world agreed. 191 countries unanimously voted in the year 2000 to adopt the Sustainable Development Goals as the organizing principle through which international cooperation was going to organize itself. And these are targeted, time-bound, quantified goals. And let me just say why that's, I think, so crucial, because this feeds into that. Every country in the world agreed that by the year 2030, we are going to meet certain goals in every country in the world. And those goals, as I said, span all the issues from economic development and poverty reduction to health and education, social inclusion, environmental sustainability, good governance, etc. The fact that they're quantified and they're time-bound actually makes them powerful. Because what happens when you realize that the world is complex and the challenges that we face are difficult is that that realization is paralyzing. Right? We say, oh, this is really too hard. It's hard for any one government. It's hard for any one academic field of study. And so you throw your hands up and you give up. This is just too big an agenda to care about. The SDGs turn that around and say, no, let's just get serious about what it means to quantify these things and deploy the power of government and our think tanks, our knowledge bases in universities to actually get it done. And so this is where data comes in and where INEGI's leadership has been so important. Because if you have quantified goals, by 2030, we're going to eliminate extreme poverty, poverty under $2.15 a day in of daily income in every country in the world. We're going to reach gender parity in education. We're going to do this, we're going to do that. Very quantified goals. That lets you reverse engineer a path from the present to the future where you're actually on a path to meet those goals. And you can do that at any scale of geography you want. We could ask that at global level. What would it take to eliminate extreme poverty? What would it take to end deforestation globally? What would be the rate of deforestation slowdown that you would need globally to do that? Okay, that's interesting, but you could do it nationally, because then that would inform and pressure national governments. You could do it subnationally, so that governments now know within countries what parts of our country are actually on track to meet these goals, what parts of our country are not on track, and begin assigning resources and public policy attention towards the part of your country that's off track. Right? And that's the future of good policymaking. Think about countries where you actually have a war room type approach. You can map out your country, your state, your city at a very high level of geographic resolution. And you can say these are the parts of our jurisdiction that are doing well according to these different indicators: environment, poverty, health, whatever. But now you're talking very, very quantitatively, and you can get to conclusions that matter, right? How many hectares of land needs to be restored to achieve goals of ecosystem service production for water cleanliness or for biodiversity or for carbon sequestration? You're talking in terms of numbers. You're talking in terms of a rate of change per year. That can then be translated into dollars, right? Because it takes resources to actually enact these policies. This is where statistical agencies play such a fundamental role, because they can move us from the beauties of idealistic goals, qualitative ideas that we agree on as humanity, where we'd like to go, and change it into a very boring, dry, technocratic exercise, without which we wouldn't be able to make good decisions as governments around the world. And INEGI has just absolutely been leading the way on this over the last few years, over the last few decades, in fact. I'll be talking a little bit more in the second session about my work in terms of land use. But this is something we've recognized for decades, right? Not incorporating environmental assets and flows into national accounts is silly. Right? It's like saying, I'm going to take money out of my savings account, move it into my checking account, and pat myself on the back for having made income. Right? It makes no sense. If you're just depleting depletable stocks of natural resources, or if you're depleting renewable natural resources at a rate that exceeds their rate of renewal. That's not a formula for long-term success. But you can't work around that until you actually measure. What is it that we have? Across the forestry sector, the mining sector, the ecosystem services sector, the fisheries, everything. And how fast are we taking it out? Because that's the only way to plan for the future in terms of balancing the consumption of the present as we take advantage of these natural assets, and a plan for sustainability into the future where these are parts of the capital that add to the country's well-being. So this is absolutely important. I think, though, it sets us up for the question of now what? Right? So Dr. Marquez explained this is a really hard exercise. It's very data intensive, and for parts of ecosystem services and ecosystem assets and things we care about, there's simply no data to get started. That's a problem that will be solved over the next decade or so. In fact, even getting here took about 30 years to do. So we'll improve. But the question is, where does this go? Even if the beyond GDP discussions move forward, even if we agree globally on measures of how do we measure different countries' income? Now what? And I think part of the challenge, and this is where I think statistical agencies could take a little bit of a step further, being careful, because these are apolitical statistical agencies, right? They can't overstep their bounds into directly having opinions on public policy. No statistical agency can do that. But the power of these time-bound quantitative frameworks, I think, and I'd love to talk more about this, gives statistical agents political cover to do quantitative exercises that are forward-looking. Right? And extrapolating into the future and saying, these are our trends. This is what 2030 looks like for Mexico under different pathways. We, as a statistical agency, don't have an opinion on which one is better. But it is within our scientific capacity that we can report. This is how our country is likely to evolve under different assumptions of what the future looks like, under, taking all of these elements of environmental goods and services into account. And that's, I think, pretty powerful. It's the spirit of the SDGs. It does technical exercises that other parts of government, let's be frank, don't have the technical wherewithal to do. And it then serves on a silver platter to the general public, to the rest of the government. Look, we're not going to tell you what to do, but it's pretty clear from the data that if we don't change course, 2030 doesn't look the way we want it to. 2050 doesn't look the way we want it to. Those are our dates for reaching net zero carbon dioxide emissions globally. And all of those things inform a data-driven public debate in the rest of government through civil society and academia and everything else. So part of what I've been trying to do here in the US, I advise countries all over the world on the SDGs, and I should say, in parentheses, that everywhere I go in the developing world, INEGI is the model I point to for what the kind of products that statistical agencies need to be producing. If you've worked in other countries in the developing world, you will miss INEGI. Trust me, I have. Trying to advise countries and saying, well, why did you use these data and these data and these data? Oh, we don't have that. What do you mean you don't have that? I thought that was standard. Of course, because my benchmarks are Mexico and Brazil, the two really gold standard statistical agencies in the developing world. The rest of the world is playing catch up. So if you're Mexican, you should be proud of your statistical institution. It's second to none. But it still has I think all institutions have a way to go in terms of really setting up the government for success, in terms of forward-looking exercises that identify gaps. These are the municipalities that are off track for these goals, and that is the power of the agenda that we've all agreed on globally. So I just wanted to pat the institution on the back. I think that this is an absolutely wonderful product. You're leading globally on this, and without these kinds of efforts, we simply don't know what we're talking about. If we don't measure it, you can't build policy around it. It's just that simple. And if we're going to get through the 21st century as a human race on this planet, we need to start measuring these critical factors that underpin our survival. And INEGI is leading the way. So congratulations. I think we have time for question and answers. But yeah, fantastic. Wonderful to be with you all.
Thank you very much, Gordon. As you can tell, Gordon was very well suited to comment into this data. So floor is open. Just identify yourself. This is a good time. We designed the conference this way that we could have plenty of time to discuss this. So, yes, James, could you identify yourself? And but, Katy, no sería bueno, I don't think, perhaps if we could put Sid, Graciela, and Gordon here, it would be easier if we can.
We can move this one.
Yeah, we can move this one. It's easy. Yeah, sorry.
I moved it before telling you.
Damos la vuelta.
Good morning. I'm Jim Gerber. I'm a fellow here at the Center for U.S.-Mexican Studies and a retired economics professor from San Diego State University. I just want to say first thank you for the incredibly interesting presentations, and thank you to INEGI and GPS for hosting this. My question has to do with the disaggregation of the data. And I'm just wondering, in terms of the environmental accounting systems, how far down do they go? Do they exist at the state level? Do they exist at the municipio level? If you could say a little bit about that, it would be. I'd find it very interesting. Thank you.
It's at national level. It's again, it's very complex. So part of the next steps could be whether we can regionalize, have certain regions estimates. But so far, it's not. It's just the 3.9% GDP, whatever. But we can do that. Actually, what we want to do is work with state governments, because it would attract them. I've been telling them all the time that we need to get into the green taxonomies, for instance. Mexico has been very successful. The finance ministry has been very, very successful now in developing these green bonds. So, but for that, you need a certain profile. So, like training state officials to develop these measurements, so that it's not INEGI's responsibility. We're part of, we are producers of information, but we are also the coordinators of the national system of statistical and geographic information. So as coordinators, we can sort of facilitate others to produce information. That would be the ideal model, because since ecosystems are site-specific, so that would be at least have allies throughout Mexico or in Cali Baja.
Someone else?
Graciela, obviously you're doing a very important effort to try to further develop this natural capital value. But I wonder if there's a country, if there's in the world that is more advanced into this, and Gordon, and how's international cooperation in it? Because I believe, I mean, this is something that even the UN is interested in every country to develop this. But if you could give us a sense of how much this has become like, I would say, an effort from the UN to make sure that every single country, not only Mexico and Brazil, will develop this kind of data.
It needs, all statistical offices are not alone. We're very thankful for that, because we are always working on standards. So we do not work alone, and INEGI is no exception to the rule. We're part of the Executive Committee of European Statisticians. We're part of the Executive Committee of the United Nations Statistical Conference. We are at the Statistical Conference of the Americas. So we do participate. We are very active in the. We build all this together. Every time we go to a country, we learn something. It's not only that INEGI showcasing their products, but on the contrary, it's moving very, very fast. So, and perhaps it's not international organization in the traditional way, and that should be interesting. If there is an international relations student around here, can write a thesis on why is different cooperation in statistical offices are different from the traditional international cooperation I've seen in other areas of government. So there is a long tradition way before the United Nations. It goes before even the League of Nations. So international cooperation in statistical offices, it's from the 19th century actually. So that would be my response. That there is a lot of cooperation, but maybe it doesn't go through traditional channels, which is good, because we are not depending on governments. We are depending on standards.
Gordon, I wonder if you want to make a comment, but I do believe, Graciela, that you're right. This will be a wonderful topic, not only for a BA thesis, but also for a PhD dissertation. This is a cooperation that it goes beyond the international system or the new international system, so it would be wonderful too. Gordon, any comment?
The only thing I would add is that these efforts have been kind of housed in the more intellectual parts of the international community for a few decades now. And the challenge in many cases has been the acquisition of data. Simply, we haven't, these ideas began in the 70s or before, but there was simply no way to quantify some of the things that were just absolutely essential to get into the exercise until more recent decades. The Europeans have the wherewithal to have gotten there first in some way. Countries like INEGI, or countries like Mexico and Brazil, as I said, are leaders in the developing world. But I think the challenge is, if you want to take this seriously as a global standard, just like every country produces GDP, and we trust that there's equivalence of method, and we trust what it means, there's some acceptable amount of error around it, and so we can construct both national and international public policy and resource transfers and international aid based on these data, that it's very hard to imagine how we get there with this kind of accounting for the least developed countries, for example, anytime soon. And so I think that there's just this breadth of implementation ability across countries that even if there's agreement upon methodology, which is, I think, what these beyond GDP discussions are working towards, there needs to be a massive amount of technical and resource flow to a select group, a few dozen countries that will need a lot of support to get up to the ability to measure in ways that can guarantee at least a basic amount of data quality for doing this. Because once it's done, it then tees up other kinds of discussions on resource flows, like aid, for example, or why should country X spend money or opportunity costs to preserve a poisonous dart frog if it's of value to somebody in the high-income world. That implies a resource flow so that the cost of preserving the biodiversity is somehow shared internationally. If we're going to get up to those level of conversations in a way that's very, very data-driven, we have a long way to go in terms of investments for data acquisition in half of the world at least. And so I think that between method and implementation is a large gap to different extents in different countries.
If I may add, I also want to be optimistic, as you mentioned along in your comment, that perhaps certain technologies would now allow us to close the gaps. Satellite imagery and big data and other techniques that are we at INEGI call it experimental statistics and experimental programs, but actually are the future in producing. There are now countries that do not conduct a population census anymore. Well, we are in INEGI far from that, very, very far. But there are other techniques and methodologies being developed as we speak that might close the gap and perhaps could be closer than we think, hopefully.
Thank you. Questions? Comments? Don't be shy.
Maybe I can ask one and take advantage of the microphone's very close. Maybe, Dr. Marquez, I could ask you to expand a little bit on the potential for resource flows from rich countries to developing countries in a world where these frameworks are further along. So you mentioned green bonds. Maybe you explain a little bit what those are, what their potential might be. There's something else that's called SDG bonds now. But how this sets up, I think it would be beneficial from your vantage point. How optimistic are you that this kind of work will set governments up for increased resource transfers from rich countries to poor countries with regards to meeting environmental goals?
I'm both optimistic and pessimistic at the same time. On the one hand, I don't want to expand much about green bonds. My dear friend Gabriel Llorio from the Finance Ministry can come here and talk. I'm not a policymaker anymore, so green bonds. It's basically you go to the market and you issue a bond, and you have certain commitments to use the money to build infrastructure, to change something connected to certain taxonomies or certain indicators. So it's a very good, it's a clever idea actually, and that would give a lot of resources for governments in search for money, scarce money. So that has been, I mean, a very good idea, and in that I'm optimistic. However, I'm pessimistic. For instance, I've seen now a lot of advertisements for companies, for businesses, like, oh, you need to get another sticker. Now you're green. Now you are ecosystem service, you're helping the ecosystem. And I don't know if they do have the information, the data, to really the assessments of whether they are really complying with certain thresholds. So that's why I'm sort of, we have to be aware. When I see all these courses in very huge universities advertising, oh, you need to get now in Spanish we say la onda, ahora la onda es ecosistemas. Well, now it's what it's popular is ecosystems. Well, no, we really need to guarantee whether there are enough data to really make those assessments possible. So I'm sort of optimistic, pessimistic, but it would be very nice if you can talk to Gabriel Llorio, because not really he has really very helpful for us, and for him, we have been also helpful for him in defining the taxonomies. No, and they combine not only the green sort of bonds, but also the social bonds. So it's green plus social bonds, which is it has been very successful in financial markets.
I want to welcome some students and professors from the Universidad Autónoma de Baja California. I get you were caught in a lot of traffic, or it was hard to.
The line was difficult to cross for the students.
The students had yeah, I mean, thank you, all the students who are here from UABC. I'm Rafael Fernández de Castro. Welcome. I know that you had a tough time in crossing the line.
No, welcome. And in my other life, I taught at UABC for I think a month or so. I came here and I thought, but it was my other life.
So thank you for coming. I mean, to cross the line on a Monday morning without Sentry, without global entry is tough. So thank you for being here. I know that. So, any other question? Any other comment? Yes, Ciro Murayama.
Thank you, Rafael. Thank you for the exposition, Graciela. I just want to remark the importance of having the INEGI in Mexico, and that INEGI is here in Baja Cali, and now there are a lot of students, and so I want to tell you that in Mexico, in Mexico we have a lot of problems like poverty, we are losing our environmental systems in a very fast way, but we have one thing that is very important. Maybe the best thing that we have done with all the problems that have in Mexico is measuring well them, the poverty, the environmental problems. So with many frequently people say, commenters and media say that Mexico is over-diagnosticated, and I don't agree. I think we need to know closely the reality, the problems, to be able to confront and to solve it. And Mexico has a very important tool, and that instrument is the INEGI. It's a public agency. It's also an autonomous agency. It means that it doesn't depend on the government. Its work goes beyond the one government or another. It has a compromise with the quality of the information, trust information, and I recommend you to use the INEGI in your thesis, in your researches. If you find the web and the data of INEGI, you are going to find a lot of information in different topics. Now we are talking about environment and economy, but also security, the perception of the Mexican society about its problems. So I just ask for the micro to recommend you to use the INEGI. Is really a institution that is in the level of the industrialized countries. Is really honor to for the Mexicans have the INEGI. Thank you.
Thank you, Ciro. I'm not gonna talk about good things about INEGI because obvious reasons. But no, what I want to tell the students, but researchers and all the people that it's here in person or it's following us virtually, is that we want to become a user-centered institution. This is very important because sometimes experts can go and look at information in a very detailed information, and they can even take the data and transform the data with all this programming and so on and so forth. But in INEGI, we want citizens to use information to build a better Mexico. So we want people walking, all those that we knock the door of houses every day, every single day. And I'm not sure that we return the information. So there is a survey, not conducted by us, but by a university. People know INEGI. People know what INEGI does. People know that we're responsible for the censuses and for the surveys. And when they are asked, what about, do you use INEGI's information? The answer is predominantly no. So we need to get information to the citizens. To understand, we are now launching, perhaps in next year, SDGs data for high schoolers, for high school students, so that they know what SDGs are and where is Mexico on the SDGs. So, because it's for them. It's not for INEGI, it's not for the government, it's for the younger generations. They need to be involved and they need to understand where is Mexico on those goals. So we're launching that with UNESCO, and we're launching many, many other projects that we want to get close to our users. And we want to build new users. So it's literacy, statistical literacy, geographic literacy, because INEGI can be a very good institution. But if it's not closer to those citizens that provide data, it's not making it's not completing its purpose. Thank you.
Graciela and Gordon, there's quite a few new data out there. We have now the natural capital value survey, but you have, basically big data that has been in social sciences the last 10 to 5 years. It's not that long. How are we getting ourselves as in universities? Are we getting ready? Are we preparing the students for this new availability of data? And Graciela, I wonder if INEGI helps some universities. How can we better prepare the students to do this? I know that we made the decision here at the School of Global Policy and Strategy to perhaps stop showing some statistical tools and as data. But how are we doing? What kind of changes are we implementing in our curricula to keep up with this enormous data and this the new quality of data we have? Is there any other question there? Yes.
I do a lot of work on the U.S.-Mexico border. And I'm wondering if INEGI collaborates at all with the Bureau of Labor Statistics or the Department of Commerce. One of the things, for example, that we don't know, if you round up the research that's been done and then you talk to experts, we don't know how many people cross the border to work. And we don't really know what they do. We don't know if they cross daily or weekly. We don't know, how much they earn. We don't know how much they spend in Tijuana or versus San Diego or Orange County, wherever they are. I mean, there's a really important, I think, for our local region, important story there because we know it's important. We know this is a significant effect on both economies and very positive. But we just don't know anything about it, really. We have kind of guesstimates, and so, but it seems like it would have to be a collaboration to put that together. I don't know that INEGI could do it on its own. Maybe it could. If it could, please do it. But maybe with BLS or I don't know who exactly, Department of Commerce, BEA, I don't know.
Okay, I can answer.
Yeah.
Good. No matter if I go to a university, to a chamber of commerce, to the supermarket, wherever, people are asking me, oh, you should do this, and you should do that. And there is only one budget. So we have huge responsibilities, the national censuses, the national surveys, and then many other things. I mean, we should ask the same question on the southern border in Mexico. So what is more important, Tapachula or San Diego? So we have to decide sometimes, and then there are methodological problems. Not only, it would be for me, it would be very, very expensive to conduct a survey here. But it's not about money. It's about methods. So who do you ask? The workers, the businesses, the workers living in Tijuana. So we might survey people, but we have to think. We have to really, first of all, decide that we want that this information is needed. Second, we have to design the concepts. What do we want to reach? And of course, it would be very nice to have a collaboration, because I think the North American region is a region. And sometimes we tend to forget that. And this seminar is part of this intention. If we can have these seminars, if we can have the micro data lab here in San Diego, then we can have a survey. But I don't know if I can, I need a permit to knock on the businesses here in San Diego and ask, oh, hello, I'm INEGI. Excuse me? INEGI, they say. So no, so it's INEGI. Oh, hello. No, in Mexico we have a very good reputation, and people know INEGI. But here, I cannot imagine how to do that, but we have to do it. So next time I visit DC, I'm sure I'll raise your point. Thank you. But we need the method. The most important thing is the method.
One thing that we're particularly proud of here in San Diego is a metropolitan planning organization that's very, very data-driven, and SANDAG is the name of that institution. And I think partnering with the MPOs at the border might actually be easier partners than anyone in DC. Okay. So to answer a question a bit on kind of how curriculum is evolving in the social sciences in general, but in graduate level policy schools more specifically, here at the School of Global Policy and Strategy, we're particularly proud to be at the cutting edge methodologically of what we teach master's students in public policy and international affairs. What that means is quickly becoming a moving target. For 20 years, it was econometrics at a high enough level, very solid causal inference for impact evaluation and policy analysis, and that was it. 10 years ago, we designed a deep course sequence on geospatial analysis, satellite remote sensing. We've added to that now data science methods for spatial analysis and really have emerged as the best policy school with regards to analytical methods in geospatial. Of course, now there's the question of what data science means for a policy school. We established here at UCSD a fantastic data science institute a few years ago. It's on its way, I think, to becoming a school eventually. And curricularly, there's a challenge now in thinking about, as the methods broaden and deepen, there is simply no way to teach a student everything when you only have them for 2 years and they have other things that they need to be learning in a graduate program for public policy. And we're due, I think, over the course of this decade for a deep rethinking of what methods means in the public policy analysis context, where it's not just defaulting to statistics and econometrics like economists and political science does it, but now a broader way of thinking about, well, students need to be comfortable looking at satellite imagery and running basic classification algorithms. Do they need to be able to go quickly into APIs and download large data sets from Twitter and Google and others for these kinds of analysis, looking at population movement data from the tech companies, if that's what's of interest. And if we want to get students to that level of fluency in data science methods, is it something that you can actually jam into a 2-year graduate degree without cannibalizing or literally, pushing out other kinds of knowledge that are important for being a thoughtful policy analyst. And so I think it's an open question. We're constantly innovating here at GPS. I think we are at the cutting edge. But what our curriculum looks like now may be quite different on the method side from what it will look like 5 years from now as we decide which of these new tools become what we consider core knowledge, without which you can't graduate from a graduate school. And I think that that's a moving target, and I don't know what the answer is, but I think as a faculty we have to explore that over the next 5 to 10 years.
Thank you, Gordon. I wonder if someone from UABC or from CETIS would like to say something about this. Yes, please. Could you identify yourself?
Sure, thank you. Thank you very much for bringing us the opportunity for being here and for all the work behind. And yeah, I work in Facultad de Idiomas in UABC, and I used INEGI data a lot for social linguistic studies, demographics, and all that. And I remember, in relation to this that you were talking about right now, that I did a kind of webinar or something. I don't know how I got that information, but the INEGI sent me in some way, I don't know how, the opportunity of participating in a webinar for getting training on the use of the tools of INEGI, which in a, let's say, domestic level, it's very intuitive, but I couldn't imagine how deep the data interpretation could be using the tools that the platform offers. And I think that would be a great idea to, foster these webinars, because it was great for me, and this is what I wanted to say only. So, thank you.
I'm glad that these invitations, I always encourage my team, like, oh, you should invite all people possible, and especially because we do believe that people need to know what we do produce. And we have to do our work also. Sometimes our webpage is not the most friendly webpage you ever visited. It's very difficult. People tend to say, oh, I found information yesterday, but today, I cannot. I cannot back to the same place. And it's true. It's absolutely true. So we are improving our webpage. We are trying to be more direct because we have very different publics. We have schoolers, primary school students, we have researchers, we have well-trained policymakers, so we have to respond to all of them in different levels of organization. So we're there, and we're trying, and it would be very happy to learn what webinar you took so that we can improve. We have a webpage that is visited 11 million times a year. And we have a special section for school students and for school teachers, and we do conduct Cátedras INEGI throughout the country. And now we're specializing in, for instance, if you have a master's degree and you want a special focus on certain surveys, we go there, and the responsibles of that surveys go and talk about the survey and so on and so forth. So. No, I'm very glad, and I think the luxury of having the information available should encourage students to learn the techniques to exploit information. Because one thing is having the information and not having the tools to exploit it. And the other is having the tools and not necessarily having the access to information. And at INEGI, we want to have both. We have the information, and we would like to provide sort of the appetite to train yourself so that you can really exploit our information. So welcome always, welcome your questions, welcome, because we do need that you use the information we produce.
Any other question? Any other question? If you want to pose your question in Spanish, you could do it. I mean, we could do this in frankly Spanglish. Yes, someone there.
En español. Yo estoy hablando en mi tesis sobre los trabajadores transfronterizos, pero en este caso yo estoy hablando sobre los ciudadanos estadounidenses que viven en Tijuana y trabajan en San Diego o en esta zona. Y bueno, estoy hablando precisamente de los precios de las viviendas, cómo se ha visto afectado esto a través de estos ciudadanos, ¿no? Entonces, quería saber si en los datos de INEGI ¿tienen ustedes esa información? Porque he buscado en los microdatos, pero solo aparecen el número de personas que cruzan diario o los trabajadores que nada más tienen la residencia, pero no hay nada que mencione sobre el impacto que tienen en el espacio, sobre todo, y el precio de las viviendas en Tijuana. Entonces, quería saber si en algún punto ustedes van a trabajar esa cuestión o si eso tiene que ver más con las instituciones de Estados Unidos que se encargan de los impuestos, que es lo que ellos pagan, ¿no? Y en lo que se refleja en el costo de la vivienda.
See, again, this is very important, and I'll take with that all these preoccupations because it's sort of a limbo. The United States do not have information on their citizens living in Tijuana, and Mexico do not have information on their citizens working in San Diego. So we do need to close that limbo, to fill in the limbo, because we do not have the information. Of course, we do have information on housing pricing. Actually, it should be something on the INPC, the inflation sort of rate for housing in Tijuana, and also the satellite account on housing should provide you with some information on that. But since we do not have, we don't have information on the people crossing to Tijuana, other than the survey on viajeros internacionales. That might provide some idea, viajeros internacionales, because they do not capture only tourism, but also do capture people working in Tijuana or people living in Tijuana. So that might be a good start, the encuesta de viajeros internacionales.
Any other question? Any other comment? Yes, please.
Me voy a permitirla también hacer en español. Hablábamos hace rato sobre el valor del capital natural y cómo han hecho pues, este esfuerzo durante los últimos años para que sea mucho más visible. Y en la inauguración pues, se hablaba de la importancia de cómo se utilizan estos datos para investigación, para políticas, para presupuestos. Y recientemente se publicó cómo el presupuesto de la Comisión Nacional de Áreas Naturales Protegidas, la CONAMP, del 2013 al 22, pues ha tenido una reducción importante en su presupuesto. Y vaya, todo el valor de toda área natural es importante, sin embargo las áreas naturales protegidas pues es aún mayor, ¿no? Y por eso fueron definidas así. Entonces, pues ¿qué está sucediendo o cómo nos está utilizando esta información para pues esa cuestión muy particular que tiene que ver el presupuesto de la CONAMP?
That's true. I mean, it's a very specific question. Usually, if we do illuminate one phenomena, doesn't mean necessarily that there would be our budget. We do receive budget cuts, even though we produce the information on the CONAMP and the information on such and such. So I think there is no pairing into budget plus information available of the relevance of the natural areas, protected natural areas. That they might be very important, and maybe they are being developed with other programs, not the agency in itself. So the agency in itself could not be, the budget do not necessarily reflect the importance given by federal governments, local governments, or municipal governments. So budget, it's always very difficult. And again, we do receive, and let me tell you, it's very difficult. It's very difficult because I have lots of demands on information, and we are a very expensive agency. That's the other thing. You want quality information, it's very expensive. The ecosystem has changed. 20 years, 30 years ago, only INEGI had the monopoly of surveys and censuses. Now you take your phone, and then you have a survey in 30 minutes. We can conduct a survey right now. So we lost the monopoly, but we haven't lost the quality standards. So we are very expensive, very, very expensive. Sometimes an agency asked me like, oh, I need to know the financial health of Mexicans. So if they are not over-indebted and so on and so forth. I said, well, of course. So it's like 50 million pesos for your survey. I mean, you want to be representative at national level, state level, municipal level, everything is possible, but it's very expensive. But we do have very high standards. Alejandra Rios, we will be talking about one of the finest surveys we have, but it's very, very, very expensive because it's about violence, in home violence. And for that, we used psychologists as surveyors. So it's not just the regular surveyor. We need to have a special training. We have to. So we're very expensive, but believe our information is the highest quality possible. So we might not have all the information you're thinking for your thesis, but the information we do have is a very good proxy of reality. That's something you can be sure of.
Someone else?
Yes.
Okay, please.
Buenos días. Mi pregunta sería más en específico sobre cómo se pueden incorporar preguntas de interés en algunos de los programas o temas que ustedes llevan a cabo, y más o menos si se llegase a autorizar, cuánto sería el tiempo en el que ese trámite se da, ¿verdad?
Yeah, that's a very, very good question. I'm answering in English. But I think it's fine. Okay, so it's fine. So it's a very good question. By law, we have to have a public consultation every time we change the questionnaires of our surveys and censuses. So, for instance, we are conducting the economic census next year, starting from February to May. So people want to ask about, let's say, use of big data in businesses, no? Which is something that we actually included, big data in businesses. But that's a new question. And every question not only costs money, we have to evaluate. Because imagine if I knocked your door and I said, oh, hello, I receive a lot of petitions that I need to ask 200 questions. So please sit and I'll be asking you for 4 hours because people around wants to know. No, our questionnaires need to be around half an hour. More than half an hour, I lost the informant. So I have to reduce. It's not, but it's also money, because I have to train who's going to ask about your question. So we go to the public consultations. We receive some recommendations. We evaluate the recommendations, and then we test the recommendations. Because sometimes you think that you're going to ask about big data in businesses, and nobody in businesses know what big data is. And so why spend your money asking something that, or you might get from another source? So once we decided that your recommendation is worth, we go and test it in a pilot project. We test in the pilot project, and if it turns out to be that we get results that are reliable, then we incorporate it in the actual censuses. That sounds bureaucratic? No, it's quality control. So we have to be sure that what we are asking, it's perfectly worldly. We're using the right words, that it's not confusing, that the one who we are asking understand perfectly what we are talking about, what we want to recover from the informant. So it's a long process. Sometimes it takes us from 1 year to 2 years, from the public consultation to the survey of the census that is being conducted. So we have the public consultations of economic censuses last year, and we will start collecting data in February. And the same is, for instance, with the NIG, the survey that measures income levels and expenditures. We have the public consultation early this year. We are now testing the changes, and we are conducting the survey in August. So it takes a lot. It seems that we are very bureaucratic, perhaps. But we want to think that it's because of high standards.
One last question or comment? Please.
Yeah, sure. My name is Daniela Macías. I'm a student at UABC, at Facultad de Economía y Relaciones Internacionales. And I do work doing surveys. And I have a question about mostly this process of public consultation, about how difficult it might turn sometimes for people to be willingly to participate or open to give information, even though I know INEGI is like this important organization in Mexico, and everybody knows INEGI and mostly are open to do it. But apart from this, the time it might take for people to answer a survey, how difficult it might turn for people to be willing to give information because of the security situation, about this quality stresses the interviewers do, that it is like, okay, I do not have to bias the information, or I have to stay in this line of not doing something, so the information, it is what I need to receive, but at the same time, that the people doesn't get angry or doesn't want to, not willing to participate. It's mostly that.
Thank you very much, Daniela. It's, again, a very important question. Really, INEGI is an extraordinary institution. We knock on the door of people and ask, how much do you earn? And they do tell us how much do they earn. But we do not knock on the door and I said, oh, Juanita, hello. Oh, how much do you earn? We build confidence with the questionnaire. We first of all, we hire local people. So Tijuana people survey Tijuana region. It's not that we came all from Aguascalientes and moved to Tijuana for 1 month and conduct the survey. We hire local. This is crucial, especially in violent and crime control areas. We hire local, so it's that your neighbor is the one who's conducting the survey. We train our people. It's not that I hire students, with all respect, like, oh, this is your questionnaire, go and knock on the doors and see what happened. No, we do have a formal training. We supervise trainees and so on and so forth. And then trust, which is intangible asset. It's very important. We are the third most trustable institution in Mexico. The Army, the Navy, and INEGI, in that order. So we knock on the doors and people, I don't know if you have been in a population censuses, when people knock on the door, oh, please sit, do you want water? Do you need to go to the bathroom? And people is very happy when we go to the census. So so that's why we need to be close. That's why I decided to be close to citizens, because INEGI exists because of the citizens that answer our questions. Do they tell us the truth? Because that's at the end of your question. I don't know if truth exists in that sense. If they, for instance, are not willing to answer, that's reality. And so we need to measure that as well. So, for instance, when someone told me like, oh, but you should, are you sure you're getting to all places in Mexico? No. But then I write down, this survey was conducted in such places because the others you cannot go. But you're telling the reality. So, but we need to take care of INEGI. And taking care of INEGI is when we knock on your door, please answer the questionnaire. Thank you.
Someone else? Yes, please. Last one. But then we have to take a break.
Gracias. ¿Cómo manejan ustedes la cuestión política de los datos? Porque hace unos años, por ejemplo, en el tema de la pobreza, ustedes decían que, por poner un ejemplo, si tenemos 5 focos en la casa, en vez de 4, ya no estoy en la línea de pobreza, pero si tengo menos de 4 focos, ya estoy en la línea de pobreza. Entonces, ¿cómo manejan ustedes esa cuestión política? Porque después de que el presidente en turno cambió la metodología o sugirió cambiar la metodología, resulta que hay menos pobres, pero cuando vas en las calles ves mucha gente pobre aún así que está por debajo de la línea de pobreza. ¿Cómo manejan ustedes esa cuestión?
Well, that's something for INEGI and for every single statistical offices. In other countries, and it's not a matter of the level of development. The GDP rate didn't like the GDP. Yeah, the GDP level didn't like, the president of Spain didn't like the GDP results, and 3 months later, the head of the statistical office was out. And this is not 20th century. This is a year ago. A year ago. So, when you said the president wants to change the methodology, that's why we are an autonomous institution, so that we decide how to measure. And we need to train journalists, because the poverty level is not defined by the number of bulbs, how did you say? Light bulbs. No, of course, but we need to train them, because first of all, we do not measure poverty. It's Coneval, it's another entity. So we only conduct a survey. And we do ask for the number of light bulbs, but we do ask for your expenses, for daily expenses for a week. And we ask for jobs and for transfers and for all sorts of income. So it's very complex, but then say, no, because I have 4 light bulbs, I did not, I'm poor, I'm under the poverty line. No, it's more complex than that. Sometimes it's simplified in that, but be sure that we do not change the methodology. We have to go to public consultations, and we have to let everybody know that we're changing the public consultations. I've been really, this morning, my team was working like, I keep like all the times having reports. And I said, how is the report on homicides? And they said, it's fine. But we have to have a clarification to certain organization for 4 cases. Perhaps we are talking about 100,000, numbers in the thousands, and someone found that something was okay for 4 cases, and we were able to clarify. We were right, but they were not reading correctly the chart. But 4 cases were under scrutiny. So be sure that we do not change the methodology, and be sure that the political pressures are there, here, in Spain, and everywhere. But INEGI is more than political pressures. So the president might like some results, and the next day, they might not like it. So they might like the poverty result, but not the homicides results, and perhaps not the employment results, and not. So we produce such a variety of information that at some point in the week, a politician will be very mad at us. So there is this governor that every time we publish certain information, he calls me. I need you to explain me, who do you ask? Because these results are not good. Sorry, Governor, I cannot reveal that. Because if I reveal that, nobody is going to answer my surveys. So I cannot tell you who I ask. And I know where I knock the door. But of course, I will not tell him. And every 3 months, I receive the call from the governor. And every time I said, Governor, this is the methodology. It's written in our webpage. You can go to the webpage, and it's there. Nothing else.
Thank you, Graciela. It's a little over noon, and we're supposed to break here. We're going to resume at 1:30. We're going to be talking about land cover and vegetation map, and again, I believe Gordon McCord will be also providing a commentary. Thank you, Graciela Marquez. Thank you, Gordon McCord. I believe this is a wonderful way to launch this Cátedra INEGI at UCSD. I felt like this was like a town hall with the president of INEGI. I mean, as you can tell, Graciela is about making sure that INEGI is for serving people, and she's opening up INEGI in Calibaja. So again, thank you for being in Calibaja. As you can tell, this is a very border group of people, and thank you all for being here. I believe, Kathy, you correct me if I'm wrong, there's going to be lunch boxes here, so we will provide lunch for you.
There are lunch boxes on the outside, so you just exit and to the right and you'll find your box.
So take your time, take it easy. And
Always find the food.
yeah, okay. Graciela knows well. She's been a professor from her almost her entire life. And so again, thank you for this wonderful launching of the Cátedra INEGI. Thank you, Gordon. We'll resume promptly at 1:30 because Graciela told me we always start on time, and we started late today because the line was awful. Thank you all for being here. Thank you.